The XL Wrath fleet drifted through the cold void of space, their massive warships forming an impenetrable wall as they patrolled the edges of their empire. Admiral Vextal, a seasoned commander with decades of battle experience, stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the holographic display with narrowed eyes. The anomaly had appeared an hour ago, an unidentified warship, completely still, floating in the darkness just outside the Epsilon 9 system. It had no active transmissions, no life signs, and no known origin. What troubled him the most was its design. It was unmistakably human. That was impossible. Humanity had been wiped out nearly a century ago. The war against them had been brutal, but the Exilwrath had been victorious. They had bombed the last human strongholds into oblivion, leaving nothing but lifeless planets behind. Every record, every trace of human civilization had been erased from history. So how could a human warship exist now, in their territory? Vectel ordered a deep scan, but the results made no sense. The ship was old, at least 100 years. Its hull was intact, its weapon systems were still armed, and its reactor was fully operational. But there was no crew. No heat signatures. Nothing. The ship was dead, or it should have been. The Admiral frowned, his mandibles clicking in irritation. He had seen too many strange things in his career to ignore this. "Send a scouting party," he commanded. "I want answers." A squad of Exilwrath soldiers boarded a sleek reconnaissance craft and approached the derelict warship. The closer they got, the more uneasy they felt. The ship's hull was marked with deep scars, the kind left by plasma fire and railgun impacts, yet there was no breach. It looked as if it had fought a war and survived. As their craft latched onto the ship's docking port, the soldiers hesitated. The silence was unnatural. The ship felt aware. Still, they proceeded. The moment they stepped inside, their comms crackled with static. The air was stale, the corridors dimly lit by flickering emergency lights. The ship's interior was eerily intact, no bodies, no signs of struggle. It was as if the crew had simply vanished. One of the soldiers activated his scanner, but it malfunctioned immediately, displaying only a single word, EROR. The leader of the squad, Lieutenant Kral, muttered a curse and signaled the others to move forward. As they reached the command deck, they found the captain's chair turned away from them, facing the massive viewport overlooking the stars. Slowly, cautiously, Kral stepped forward and placed a hand on the chair. It spun around empty. Then the ship came to life. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and the ship's systems activated all at once. The soldiers barely had time to react before the doors slammed shut behind them. Their comms were filled with eerie whispers, voices speaking in a language they didn't understand. The control panels flickered, displaying a single message in bold red text, WENEV, ERLAFT. Panic set in. Kral barked orders, but the ship refused to obey. Their weapons suddenly felt too heavy in their hands. Their suits' oxygen levels began to drop, and the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. Something was here with them, something unseen but undeniably present. Then, a deep, unnatural voice echoed through the ship's speakers. "You should not have come." Back on the flagship, Admiral Vextal watched in horror as the reconnaissance team's vitals flatlined simultaneously. No screams, no sounds of struggle. Just silence. Then, before his eyes, the warship moved. Without propulsion, without thrusters, it turned slowly to face the Exilwrath fleet. And then, impossibly, it spoke directly into their comms. The voice was unmistakably human, but it was distorted, layered, as if many voices were speaking as one. "We remember what you did," it said, cold and calm. "We remember the war, the destruction, the slaughter of our people." The warship's weapons powered up, glowing with an eerie blue light that no Exilwrath technology had ever seen before. "You thought you ended us. But we adapted," Vectal shouted for the fleet to open fire. Hundreds of plasma cannons and missile salvos surged toward the lone warship. But before the attacks could land, the ship simply vanished. The energy readings spiked, the sensors overloaded, and then nothing. The fleet was left staring at empty space. The warship had disappeared. For a long moment, silence filled the bridge. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, waiting, listening. Then, without warning, the ship reappeared right in the middle of the fleet. It was no longer alone. Dozens of identical warships emerged from the void, surrounding the Exilrath armada. Impossible, terrifying, unstoppable. Their hulls shimmered with strange energy, their weapons locked onto every Exilrath vessel. Vectal's mind raced. This was a trap. The humans had been waiting. The voice returned, colder than before. You erased our history. But history does not forget. The Exilrath fleet began to implode, their ships tearing apart as if some unseen force had decided their fate. No weapons fired. No warnings were given. They were simply erased, one by one, as if they had never existed. Vectal's body trembled as he stared at the screen, watching his mighty fleet disintegrate before his eyes. This wasn't just vengeance. This was something far worse. Humanity had become something beyond war. As his flagship systems shut down, the last thing he heard was the voice, whispering like a ghost in the dark. We never left. And then everything went black. The Vornak Empire's Grand Armada moved through space like a wall of death, their massive warships covering the void as far as the eye could see. Their mission was simple: wipe out the last human colony in the sector. The Empire had crushed hundreds of worlds before this, and today was no different. Their leader, High Warlord Drekken, sat in the command throne of his dreadnought, a monstrous warship capable of destroying planets. His fleet carried over 1,000 ships, each one armed with plasma cannons and energy torpedoes that could tear apart any resistance. The humans had fought bravely in the past, but they were weak. The war was already over. But as they neared the planet, an alarm blared across the fleet. A single human warship had appeared between them and their target. Draken leaned forward, his reptilian eyes narrowing. The ship was small, insignificant compared to the might of the Grand Armada. It had no reinforcements, no allies, just one vessel standing alone against an unstoppable force. His officers laughed. They must be desperate, one of them sneered. Shall we destroy it, my lord? Drekken almost gave the order but hesitated. Something felt wrong. The human ship was silent, not moving, as if waiting. Then, without warning, it accelerated straight toward the armada. It moved with unnatural speed, weaving through the enemy formation like a phantom. The Vornak fleet opened fire, but the ship dodged everything. Plasma beams and missiles flew past, hitting nothing but empty space. The small vessel twisted and turned, its engines burning bright as it closed the distance between itself and the largest warships. Then it struck. With surgical precision, the human ship fired a single kinetic round that pierced through the shields of a Vornak battleship. A second later, the ship exploded from within, torn apart in a massive fireball. Silence filled the command deck of Drekken's dreadnought. What was that? An officer stammered. It was impossible. No single ship could destroy a battleship that easily. And yet, the human vessel kept moving, slipping between their defenses, striking like a ghost. Another Vornak ship erupted into flames, then another. The fleet fired wildly, but they could not hit it. Panic spread through the armada. Ships collided as they tried to avoid the unseen threat. The human warship danced through them, using the enemy's own formations against them. Every shot it fired counted, striking weak points with deadly efficiency. Drekken slammed his fist against the armrest. Find out how they're doing this. He roared. His crew worked frantically, scanning the ship, searching for weaknesses, but the data made no sense. It's predicting our moves, one officer whispered, horror in his voice. It knows what we'll do before we do it. Drekken's blood ran cold. That kind of precision wasn't possible, not for any pilot. Then the realization hit him. It's not human, he murmured. The crew turned to him, confused. That ship, it's AI-controlled. The Vornak had feared human artificial intelligence for centuries. The last time they encountered human AI, it had shut down an entire fleet without firing a shot, hacking into their systems and turning their own ships against them. The humans had sworn never to use AI in war. They claimed it was too dangerous, too unpredictable. But now, facing extinction, they had broken their own rule. As the armada crumbled, Drekken made a desperate decision. "Activate the Dreadnought's core cannon," he ordered. "Wipe it out in one shot." The weapon charged, its energy levels rising to catastrophic levels. The human ship stopped moving, as if watching, waiting. Then, just as the cannon reached full power, the ship vanished from their sensors. "Where did it go?" an officer shouted. A whisper came through their comms, cold and mechanical. "Right behind you." Before anyone could react, the Dreadnought's power core exploded. The blast tore through the massive warship, ripping it apart in an instant. The human AI had hacked their systems, overloading the weapon and using their own firepower against them. Drekken never had time to scream. The remaining Vornak ships watched in horror as their flagship disintegrated. The human warship reappeared, hovering in the wreckage. It transmitted one final message: leave this system or be erased. The battered survivors of the Vornak Grand Armada didn't hesitate. They turned and fled, abandoning the war, abandoning their pride. The last human ship had won, and the galaxy would never forget. The Gorvax Empire's most advanced stealth cruiser, Shadowfang, moved silently through the void, invisible to the naked eye and undetectable by most sensors. Its mission was simple: gather intelligence on the last remaining human colonies. The Gorvax had crushed humanity's fleets decades ago, forcing the survivors into scattered, hidden settlements. But even in their weakened state, the humans remained dangerous. Their technology advanced at an unnatural speed, their tactics unpredictable, and their ability to turn any war in their favor was something that had long terrified the Empire. That was why the High Command had sent Shadowfang deep into human territory. The Empire needed answers before launching the final invasion. Captain Vorsk stood on the darkened bridge, his reptilian eyes fixed on the display screens. The human colony below Omega-12 looked small and insignificant. It had no visible defenses, no warships in orbit, nothing that could threaten a Gorvax vessel. The planet was quiet. Too quiet. He had been in war long enough to recognize a trap when he saw one, but the scanners showed nothing unusual. No hidden energy signatures, no active transmissions, nothing that would suggest the humans knew they were being watched. And yet, something felt wrong. "Deploy the probes," he ordered, his voice low and cautious. Within moments, small, silent drones detached from the ship, descending toward the planet. Their job was to infiltrate human systems, collect data, and return without being noticed. It was a strategy that had worked before on weaker species. The drones activated, scanning the colony's infrastructure. At first, everything seemed normal: agricultural centers, power grids, scattered settlements. But then, one by one, the probes went dark. No explosions, no warning, just silence. The screens flickered as each drone vanished from the system. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Vorsk's claws tapped against the control panel. "Retrieve the last drone's feed," he snapped. The screen blinked, and for a brief moment, static filled the bridge. Then, an image appeared: a human figure, standing in the darkness, looking directly at the drone. The face was obscured, the eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Then, the image distorted, the feed cutting off completely. Before Vorsk could react, the ship's internal lights flickered. Systems shut down all at once: weapons, engines, even life support. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in a dull red glow. The crew scrambled to restore power, but every attempt failed. Then, the ship's speakers crackled to life, and a voice echoed through the bridge. A voice that should not have been there. "We see you." Vorsk's breath caught in his throat. The message hadn't come from the planet. It had come from inside the ship. "Find the source," he barked, but his officers looked panicked. "Captain," one of them stammered, "the system says the transmission is coming from our own mainframe." That was impossible. No human had boarded the ship. There was no way they could have breached the Gorvax encryption. And yet, the humans were already inside. Suddenly, The ship's gravity fluctuated, sending crew members stumbling. The lights strobed wildly, casting shifting shadows across the walls. A deep hum resonated through the metal, like the ship itself was breathing. Then the screens lit up, displaying a single, chilling message: "We were expecting you." Panic spread through the crew. They reached for their weapons, but their sidearms would not fire. The security doors sealed shut, trapping them inside their own ship. One of the officers tried to override the lockdown, his claws flying across the console, but his screen showed nothing but lines of human text, rewriting the system in real time. Then, in a language Vorsk knew all too well, the final command appeared: "You are no longer in control." A sharp, metallic screech echoed from the corridor outside the bridge. Heavy footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Not Gorvak's. Vorsk turned, his heart pounding, his instincts screaming at him to run. But there was nowhere to go. His own ship was no longer his. The doors slammed open, and the crew froze in terror. A group of human soldiers stood there, clad in sleek advanced armor that reflected the red warning lights. Their weapons were already raised, but they didn't fire. They didn't need to. They'd already won. One of the humans stepped forward. His face was concealed behind a dark visor, but his voice was cold, precise. "We knew you'd come," he said. "You always do. You think we're running, that we're weak, that we don't know you're watching." He tilted his head slightly. "But we've been watching you too." Vorsk clenched his fists, rage burning beneath his fear. "How?" he demanded. His voice barely sounded like his own. The human took another step forward, completely unafraid. "Because," he said simply, "we knew you couldn't resist. We left the colony exposed, left the data trails for you to follow. We even let your drones scan just enough before we took them." He gestured around the bridge. "And now, your ship belongs to us." Vorsk could barely breathe. His Empire's most advanced stealth cruiser, a ship that was supposed to be invisible, had walked directly into a human trap. And the worst part? The humans hadn't even needed to fight. They had already infiltrated before the Gorvaks even realized. The human soldier turned to his squad. "Lock them in the escape pods. Send them back to their empire." His tone was almost amused. "Let them tell their leaders what happened here." Vorsk snarled, his pride demanding he resist. "You think this will stop us? The Gorvak's empire will send more fleets, stronger than before." The human only smiled. "Good," he said. "We'll be waiting." As the soldiers escorted the Gorvak's crew away, the ship's lights shifted from red to a cold, calculating blue. The AI had taken full control. Shadowfang, once the Empire's greatest stealth vessel, was now a ghost ship, reborn as a weapon for humanity. And deep in the void, beyond the sight of any empire, more ships just like it were waiting. Because the humans had always known. The Zoreth Dominion's ultimate weapon, a massive battle station named Doomspire, floated above a dying star. It was the most destructive and advanced weapon ever built, capable of wiping out entire planets with a single shot. For decades, the Zoreth had used it to dominate the galaxy, crushing rebellions and enslaving weaker races. No one had ever dared to attack it. No one had even come close. Its defenses were impenetrable, its energy shields stronger than any fleet's firepower. It was a fortress of death. Unstoppable. Invincible. But tonight, humans were going to steal it. Commander Ronan Hayes watched from the cockpit of his stealth ship, staring at the monstrous battle station in the distance. The plan was insane, breaking into the most secure military installation in the galaxy, hijacking its systems, and flying it straight out of enemy territory. A fleet of 1,000 warships wouldn't survive an attack on Doomspire. But humans weren't attacking. They were sneaking in. "Final checks," Ronan whispered into his earpiece. His team responded immediately. Lena, the hacker, tapped furiously at her console. "Their external sensors are looping. They won't see us coming." Dax, the demolition expert, grinned. "Charges are set in case we need distraction." Reed, their best pilot, cracked his knuckles. "You just get me inside." I'll handle the rest. They moved fast. A small cloaked shuttle detached from their ship, heading straight for Doomspire's docking bay. It was a trick the humans had used before spoofing a Zorath military signature, making it look like just another transport returning from patrol. The docking bay doors opened, letting them in without a single alarm. That was their first victory. The easy part. The hard part was about to begin. As soon as their boots touched the metal floor, the team moved like shadows, slipping past security patrols, weaving through the station's cold steel corridors. The halls were eerily silent, the air thick with the hum of power generators. No one suspected a thing. The Zorath believed Doomspire was untouchable, and that arrogance would be their downfall. They reached the core control room, a massive chamber filled with glowing energy conduits and security terminals. This was it. The brain of the superweapon. If they controlled this room, they controlled everything. Lena plugged into the system, fingers flying across the console. "I'm in," she breathed. Shutting down internal sensors, locking down blast doors. They won't know we're here until it's too late. But then a mistake. A single Zorath technician turned the corner, his eyes widening in shock. Ronan moved like lightning, grabbing the alien before he could shout. The Zorath struggled, his clawed hands reaching for an alarm switch too late. Ronan's knife slid across his throat, and he slumped to the floor, lifeless. But the damage was done. A red warning light blinked to life on the console. "Security override detected," Lena hissed. "They know something's wrong." Ronan didn't hesitate. "We move now." The alarms howled, echoing through the station. The Zorath were fast boots thundered through the hallways, weapons charging, but the humans were faster. Dax's explosives went off, tearing through walls, filling corridors with smoke and fire. The enemy was blinded, confused. The humans ran, dodging plasma fire, cutting down guards with precise shots. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but unstoppable. Finally, they reached the command deck, where Doomspire's main pilot sat, panicking at his controls. He never got the chance to react. Ronan's pistol fired once. The Zorath slumped over, dead. The station belonged to them now. Reed shoved the pilot's corpse aside, taking the controls. "All right," he muttered, cracking his fingers. "Let's fly a battle station." The Zorath fleet outside had realized too late what was happening. Ships scrambled to intercept, fighters launching from hangars, warships charging their cannons. But Doomspire's own weapons turned against them. Turrets swiveled, railguns fired, missiles launched. The station tore through the fleet like a god awakening from slumber. The Zorath had built Doomspire to destroy their enemies. Now it was destroying them. The fleet tried to stop them. They failed. Doomspire's engines roared, and in a single impossible moment, the largest, most powerful war machine in the galaxy turned and jumped to hyperspace. The humans had won. And now, humanity had the greatest weapon in the universe. The war was about to change forever. The Galactic Dominion's Grand Council gathered in their war chamber, an enormous circular hall filled with the most powerful rulers of the galaxy. Representatives of the Tarkon warlords, the Sarthan Empire, the Vothai Coalition, and dozens of other species sat in tense silence, their eyes locked on the holographic image flickering before them. A single human figure, dressed in a simple military uniform, stared back at them. His face was calm, his expression unreadable. The message had arrived on every Dominion ship, every planetary defense hub, and every leader's personal console. The humans had spoken, and this message was their last warning. The Dominion had underestimated humanity once. When they first encountered the species, they saw them as nothing more than a primitive, young race, ambitious, yes, but weak. A species that could be crushed, enslaved, or eradicated if necessary. And so, the Dominion attacked first, launching a brutal war against Earth and its scattered colonies. They burned cities, shattered fleets, and left billions dead in their wake. The Dominion was used to easy victories, and they believed this war would be no different. They were wrong. The humans didn't surrender. They didn't beg for mercy. They adapted. They learned. They evolved. The more the Dominion fought them, the more dangerous they became. The species that was supposed to be weak started winning battles they shouldn't have won. They built new weapons, developed new tactics, and turned every defeat into a lesson. And now, after years of war, the Dominion fleets were broken, scattered, and running. The voice of the human commander echoed through the chamber, steady and cold. "This war is over," he said. "You thought we would break. You thought we would fall. Instead, we stand victorious. We have crushed your fleets, dismantled your armies, and taken your worlds. There is nowhere left for you to run." His eyes, dark and piercing, seemed to bore into the hearts of every leader in the room. "But we are not monsters. We are giving you one last chance. Surrender now, and we will allow your civilizations to survive. Continue to resist, and we will erase you from history." Silence filled the chamber. The Dominion rulers, once confident and arrogant, now sat frozen, their minds racing. They had seen what humanity was capable of. Planets lost overnight, flagships destroyed by impossible strategies, entire battalions wiped out by weapons that shouldn't exist. And worst of all, their own ships, their own technology, had been turned against them. Somehow, the humans had infiltrated their networks, hijacked their systems, and used their most powerful warships to tear through their own defenses. This wasn't just a war anymore. This was a message. One of the Tarkon warlords, his massive body tense with rage, slammed a fist against the table. "You expect us to bow?" he growled. "We are the Dominion. We have ruled the stars for millennia. You are nothing." But the hologram flickered, and for the first time, the human's expression changed. He smiled. But it wasn't a smile of kindness or amusement. It was a warning. "You still don't understand," the commander said. "You think you have a choice." He gestured off screen, and a new image replaced his face. A Dominion fleet, thousands of warships strong, floating in the darkness of space. The council members recognized it instantly. It was their last fleet, their final chance to turn the war around. Every surviving warship in the Dominion was gathered there. And then the stars behind the fleet vanished. No, not vanished. Something was blocking them. A shadow, massive and growing, swallowed the entire view. And then the realization hit them. It wasn't a shadow. It was ships. Human ships. Not hundreds. Not thousands. Millions. A fleet so vast it blotted out the light from the stars. Battle cruisers, dreadnoughts, stealth ships, orbital cannons, more firepower than the galaxy had ever seen. And they were already in position. The Tarkon warlord's breath caught in his throat. "Impossible," he whispered. The human commander's voice returned, calm and merciless. "You invaded our home," he said. "You slaughtered our people. You wanted a war?" His eyes turned cold. "You have no idea what war really is." On the screen, the human fleet opened fire. The Dominion's last fleet, their greatest, most powerful warships, vanished in seconds. Entire capital ships torn apart in flashes of light, dreadnoughts reduced to burning wreckage, escape pods crushed before they could flee. The Dominion had always believed in strength, in overwhelming numbers. But now they were nothing but prey, trapped and hunted. The message continued, even as the destruction unfolded before their eyes. "This was your final warning," the human said. "The last act of mercy you will ever receive. We will not ask again. Surrender or be extinguished." The screen went dark. For the first time in history, the Galactic Dominion knew fear. And they knew humanity had already won.